Hey, thanks for listening to the Welding Tips and Tricks podcast. I'm Jody Collier.
I'm Roy Crumrine.
Jonathan Lewis cannot make it right now. As often happens, he got a hot welding job come in his shop, so he's going to be a few minutes late joining us here. But we have a special guest on this podcast. It is Paul Brinegar, also known as ZTFab on Instagram, Welding Web, and several other places. How you doing, Paul?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Appreciate you being on. Also, this episode is sponsored by CK Worldwide. They make the FlexLock 360 torch, lots of other gas lens kits, and the stubby gas lens kit and Superflex cables. We all use their products, and we're happy to have them as a sponsor. Paul, I noticed you just have been super active on welding, maybe in spurts, I don't know, but it's not hard to find a post of yours on Welding Web or even on my forum, the Welding Tips and Tricks forum, or other places where you're answering questions, posting pictures, just you're super involved. And, that's why I've known of you since probably, I'm going to guess, 2010 or 11, sometime around then. And I'll just go ahead and spill the beans. It's going to come out anyway. It's the MIG like TIG thread that started back in the day and never died. Still going.
Yeah, it's definitely still going.
Because the guys, I didn't know about it, and some guys that I was working with said, "Hey, do you know anything about this MIG like TIG thing? How do you do this look? How do you get this look on MIG?" And I'm like, "I don't really know what you're talking about." And so they showed me the thread, and it was already going. I mean, it was already full-blown, almost viral, at that time. And I looked, and I looked, and I looked, and I'm looking. I'm like, "Dadgum, I want to learn how to do that." And from what I normally do, and from what I saw that you do, I'm like, we've definitely got some different things going on there, different settings or different size wire, different inductance settings, different angles. I don't know. So I never have really dialed it in. I just kind of like moved on to other things. But I've tried a few times, and I still want to. But it's a very popular topic because it just looks so cool. It seems like especially on an outside corner joint or something that's anywhere from 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, it just wraps those corners and it looks like art. So that really got the juices going there on Welding Web for a while. And of course, that's how I heard of you, and I've been kind of following you ever since.
And that's how that thread started. Another member of Welding Web started a different thread and was upset because a customer has brought in a picture of one of my welds and told him he could only have this job if he could make the welds look like mine. So he went on there on a rant talking about how he didn't get this job because of my welding, kind of blaming me as if I had something to do, with it. So one of the moderators started this other thread, "Hey, let's get, a conversation going to see if we can all figure out how to do this." And what's funny is I kind of stumbled into that technique when I started learning how to weld on my own. I never had any formal welding training. I bought a little Lincoln SP125 from my local welding supply and just picked up some scrap metal and started welding. And it was kind of a crutch almost to stretch that machine's capabilities. And like you said, open corner joints are really where that process shines. You're able to get down into the root, wet in the toes pretty well. A 110 MIG welder with 023, 025 wire really isn't going to be good for a heavy fillet weld or a T-joint. I was building my Nova outside of high school. I had a 63 Nova two-door that I worked on in auto shop and wanted to start doing some modifications to, and bought the welder and just started playing. And that's kind of how I ended up kind of learning that technique, just kind of fell into it.
Yeah. I remember this is one of the questions that we like to ask, and I'll try to lead right in there about how you got started welding, but you kind of just told us. I'd like to hear a few more details, but I do remember hearing you on one of those threads saying you basically started with a 15-volt MIG and a chop saw or a grinder, but not much more than that, and then just took it from there with elbow grease and blood, sweat, and tears, basically teaching yourself this and that and growing your business and growing your skill set. So if there's more to how you got started, love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. I was more into mechanics than anything. My high school didn't have a metal shop class as much as I wanted to take one. That just wasn't available. But we did have an auto shop, and I always loved cars. I had a 63 Nova, like I just mentioned, had a 66 Mustang, so I was always working on something. And just outside of high school, I wanted to do more to the cars. I built a little 355 small block for the Nova with a 4-speed, wanted to put some ladder bar suspension in the back. Kind of got to the point where I didn't want to pay somebody else to do the work for me. I really wanted to do it on my own. Decided to go down to my local air gas, buy a welder, and see what I could do with it. So I found that little SP125 Plus from Lincoln and bought a whole welding package. I mean, I didn't have a welding hood or gloves or anything, so I pretty much bought what I could right there and came back home, and I had a spare fender for the car and started teaching myself just how to run beads on the fender. And I spent probably a good month or two just doing practice stuff before I touched anything on the actual car. I then started going to a vocational school for mechanics. I was a Toyota mechanic for years before I became an actual fabricator. A couple of my buddies were racing off-road in the late 90s, and I started racing with them, and they needed somebody to work on the race truck. You know, racing off-road, there's always something breaking or cracking or new parts that need to get made, so I started building lower control arms and rear end housings and fixing the roll cage, and before I knew it, I was pretty deep into this obsession of fabrication. And I remember the Off-Road Expo of 2000, I bought my first Hypertherm plasma cutter. They had a Hypertherm PowerMax 380 there, and I bought it at the show and took it home and immediately ran through, you know, a 4x4 sheet of material just playing, and absolutely loved the thing, and kind of went on from there just as a hobby. Eventually left Toyota to go build hot rods down in a street rod shop in Huntington Beach, California. Worked there for a little while, was really liking the off-road racing I was doing on the side, so I decided to open up my shop full-time because I had a lot of customers that I had been doing projects for while I was working full-time at the street rod shop. And in 2003, I opened my shop, was doing everything from hot rods and dragsters to off-road trucks. I even got into the Jaws of Life rescue tools just as job shop welding. I used to weld the S7 tool steel blades for the Jaws of Life cutter, all the aluminum tanks for their hydraulic reservoirs. So I started kind of branching out from the motorsport stuff into job shop, and I did that for quite a while, up until when I took a job working for a big manufacturer of ATV and UTV parts as their lead fabricator in the R&D department. Helped develop a lot of product line that they had for the Polaris Ranger and Razor line, door systems, armor protection for skid plates and things like that. And that's where I kind of got into CAD design as well. Before that, I was kind of old school fabricator, cardboard and templates and hand cutting a lot of things. So working at that company kind of exposed me to more of the manufacturing and the CAD development, being able to design an entire product, develop it, and see it get produced. That was really fun to get involved with. Left that company and went back on my own again full-time, doing job shop stuff, kind of decided that I wanted to get a little bit away from the motorsports and bought my CNC plasma cutter. I did that in 2012. It's kind of just been plugging away ever since on the job shop stuff. And this last year with the release of your video, Jody, I launched the a la carte website where I do my welding cart kits, and really enjoy doing the manufacturing now more than the job shop. That's kind of where I want to take it now. So it's kind of been a long road from going from a mechanic to a welder to a fabricator, and now hopefully into a manufacturer.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, it is.
We do like to, whenever we have somebody on like this, you're our guest, you're volunteering your time here, so definitely want to give you an opportunity to make sure everybody's clear on what you just said about you make welding cart kits with sort of minimal welding required. Really good. I'm going to plug them for you here, Paul, because I put one together. I got the video of it, but it's just such a well-designed kit, and it's like it's the last cart you're ever going to need. It's better than anything out there. It's fun to build, and you can say you put it together yourself, but it's the engineering and thought process is already theirs. What I really noticed when I got this cart, you got hardware with McMaster-Carr bags, which, it's all good hardware. From the chain to the clevis to the wheels to the swivel casters, all good stuff, no chintzy stuff. And when you get done, you got an awesome looking cart that's got places to hang your cables, even got a place for your foot pedal if you get that option, and you can push it around the shop with like one finger. It's just a really nice cart. I don't want to go overboard, or it sounds like I'm being over promotional, but it's a really nice cart. I really appreciate you sending that to me, and it was a pleasure to put together and film.
I'm really honored to have one in your shop.
I really like the grinding stand mount that you have for the wall too. That's really cool.
Thanks. I try to look at products. I mean, that's nothing unique. There are other grinder racks out there. I try to take a step back, kind of make the better mousetrap type deal and offer a couple things that I haven't seen before. Cord wraps, I've never seen really any on the market that have an integrated cord wrap on them. There's also an integrated tool holder that sits behind the grinder, so you never have to try to hunt down that pesky tool when you can't get that sanding disc off of there.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a drawer full of them that I don't know what to do with. always having to run somewhere else to get the tool I need. So just try to take an objective look at what I'm making and how I'm building it. It's hard for me sometimes to think back 10, 15 years ago when I started with just a little Lincoln 110 welder and a chop saw and, not a shop full of tools, a CNC plasma cutter and press brake and, CNC tubing bender and everything that I have here now, and think of what it was like when that's all I had. So I try to step back and think of somebody in their garage who's just getting started and they don't have a way to bend sheet metal or even cut out internal parts of sheet metal. They might have access to a cutoff wheel and a chop saw and the welder, and that's about all they have. So offering those carts was a good way for me to get higher quality parts in somebody's hand who doesn't have that ability, but they still get their hand in it with welding it and putting it together, so they have pride in the product.
Right.
So it's not something they bought and just put together.
It's like their first project with the welder they just bought.
Exactly.
One time I bought like 5 of those $50 carts from Northern Tool, and it takes you about an hour to put one of those things together. I mean, it takes you a lot longer than you think. It's kind of like, whatever from IKEA or whatever, but worse because nothing really just fits in place. It's just a bunch of sheet metal screws, and of course you do it wrong and you have to disassemble part of it and back up because you didn't read the instructions and that kind of thing. And then when you got it together, you don't have anything that's all that great anyway. And if somebody's building a cart on their own, if they have to go buy the metal and then put it together, you're not going to save that much money as opposed to what your carts run, and you're not going to have the same cart, that's for sure. But, the only way a person can save, basically, if they have the scrap laying around, that there's enough stuff to build a cart, and then they, might have $50 in a cart, and they might have something decent. But anyway, it's not for everybody. It's for somebody that wants to really have pride in their cart and have a super nice cart. Most carts the manufacturers don't give enough thought to cable management and that kind of thing. And you're just like, what do I hang? Okay, there's a place for my torch, but what about the ground clamp? What about the foot pedal? What about this and that? And what about if I want to put a tote tray here with all my wire snips and things on it? You run out of spots pretty quick on the mass-produced carts. So anyway, just wanted to camp out on the carts for a little while. I know that's what you're up to right now. Yeah.
I'm flipping through the pictures of them on Instagram, and they are pretty cool. I like them a lot.
Thanks.
I also like the rod rack holder. That's fun to put on the wall.
Yeah, I'm just trying to offer a reasonable line too. Those things aren't crazily priced. I'm trying not to price people out of the market. That's something that most everybody can pick up. And I love people building things for themselves. That's how I started. So I definitely don't expect anybody and everybody to buy my stuff. I appreciate that anybody wants to buy anything I make. For the longest time, I never even put my name on any product I built. That's been one of the biggest things I've had to learn, is to reasonably self-promote.
Yeah.
And offer something that I can make that I know not everybody can. But, I love seeing everything on Instagram. There's so many people out there who know how to do so many great things. And that's one of the things I love about that social media platform, is even seeing somebody get one of my cart kits and configure it how I never would have thought of. They put something where I didn't think necessarily that it would be best, or even think that it would go, where they put it. But just seeing everybody build everything on their own and kind of making something out of nothing definitely is nice to see. And there's a huge community on Instagram. And honestly, my business wouldn't be what it is right now with the welding carts without Instagram.
I look at the pictures of the grinding racks and the wire racks, but mostly the grinding rack is, like for someone like me working out of my garage at home where I'm in a real tight spot, so space is limited, having something like that on the wall, that frees up a drawer of grinders so that I can put other stuff in that toolbox or in my cabinet of a shelf that I have with all my grinders on it. So it's all just space saving, which is a huge, huge thing when you're in a small area.
Yeah, and I'm actually in a small shop. My shop's only 1,300 square feet. I've talked to a few people, and I think they have a feeling I'm in a rather large facility, and I'm not. I have to make use of what I have, and I have to think cubically, so I try to go vertically with as many things as I can. I've got a 12-foot tall tubing rack that doesn't even have the first tier until 6.5 feet high. I've got a rolling ladder to access all those materials on that rack. I have my bandsaws and my tubing bender stored underneath that area to kind of gain as much footprint as I can. So I try to utilize as much space as I can, understand that it's hard when you're trying to put as many tools as you can in a small area. And most people, we're kind of spoiled here in Southern California. We don't really park our cars in the garage, but I know a lot of people have to, and especially with wives who want to keep their cars inside, they kind of have a small limited work area a lot of the time.
Yeah. When I went to buy my house, I told my wife, I'm sorry, the garage is mine. I ended up getting just a small corner of it, but,
Yeah.
you know, it's still, the car parks outside.
Yeah.
I remember you saying you still had a Miller Synchrowave, Paul?
Yeah, I've got a Miller Synchrowave 250 I bought brand new in 2001. It's the DX with the TIG Runner package. That thing has not missed a beat in the 16 years I've owned it now.
That was my first machine. Not the DX, but the first generation Synchrowave 250. And it ties into what we were just talking about, because I was renting space at a shop, and I had a nice little area with a big 4x8 welding table, the big half-inch plate on top of it. I have my Synchrowave there and toolbox right there, plenty of space. And then that situation ended, so I was moving my little operation into my garage, and so sold the Synchrowave, and that was right when the Dynasty 200s came out. Sold that Synchrowave and got a Dynasty 200, and I mounted it about 6 feet up on the wall on a little wall bracket. Same thing, just to gain floor space. You know, I didn't have to have the power. My Synchrowave needed about a 100 amp breaker to get the most out of it. I could run the Dynasty pretty much on a 30 amp breaker. So the space savings and all that's what led me to do that, just to free up space. I love the Synchrowave. I kind of wish I had it back right now, but, you know, it was a space thing.
Yeah, I love mine, and you're right, it is a power hog, and it is kind of a space hog. And when I move it out to go do some welding in a different part of my shop, I kind of realize the hole it leaves where it was. Sometimes wish I would change out to a Dynasty or something like that, but it's been such a reliable machine, and I, to be honest with you, don't do much welding on the daily anymore with manufacturing the cart kits. I'm mainly doing, you know, tube bending, CNC plasma cutting, and press brake work. So
yeah, well, there's been times when after I swapped, when I would get a, you know, half-inch thick aluminum job in, or some aluminum casting, where I had to pull some rabbits out of some hats to make it happen with that Dynasty, you know, sticking it, making sure the wife ain't looking, sticking it in the oven, you know, and run it down in the garage with pot holders, add some helium in there, you know, whatever.
That's funny.
But,
I had a job that I used to do for a rigging company. They were blade guards for wind turbines, and they were for erecting what they call the nacelle, which is the blade assembly up onto the top. And they were all 1/4 inch thick aluminum. And this is when I was working out of my house, and I had to use my home oven, and I was doing about 20 of them at a time. Mm-hmm. And kind of once you started, you had to preheat them, and you start the cycle of one's preheating while you're welding one, and you got to get through all of them before you can stop. Yep. So I've definitely been there.
I worked at a shop once where we had a job. It was like a 1/2 inch plate that was getting welded to an 1/8 inch plate. And I was telling them, I'm like, you can't heat up the 1/2 inch enough before the 1/8 inch plate is like almost gone. So we need to preheat these, and we need to preheat them, like you're saying, you know, put them in an oven and get it going. And they're like, well, we can't do that. And I don't know. And I said, just go get an easy bake oven that's scratch and dent from Sears and get it in here, and we'll just stick it on 500 degrees and put them in there. You know, and they laughed at me. And like a week later, here it comes, this black scratch and dent oven sitting over in the back corner. And I'm like, oh, so now you're listening. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still have a small air convection oven above my welding table for preheating small parts. It goes up to 500 degrees, and I got it for like $40 at a Goodwill store. And man, that thing works great. It's a little small, so you can't put a bunch of, you know, items in there, or even very big items. But for the occasional repair job or small job, it comes in handy.
Yeah, they do. All it has to do is get it hot. I mean, who cares what it is, as long as it gets hot.
Exactly. You know, the same thing applies to a dishwasher. Is a pretty useful thing to have in a shop too, if you're doing any kind of coating after the fact. You know, making sure that thing's free from grease and oil and crud. You know, my buddy Ricky, machine shop, he does some black oxide coating on a lot of parts, and we were going to build a black oxide line, and the dishwasher was going to be part of that line, but you know, he wound up selling his business. But the reason he learned that is because he ran some parts through his wife's dishwasher, you know.
That really works.
Exactly.
You had said just a little while ago that you do a lot of brake press working with these cart kits. As of recording this, you're going to be getting your new brake press tomorrow. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I one of the reasons I went to FabTech, where I met Jody and JD and a couple other people, was to look at the market. When you buy a press brake, it's a commitment, and you need to make sure you're getting what's going to fit your needs. You know, it's kind of like buying a car. You can go cheap or you can go real expensive. It just depends on what you want it to do. I really fell in love with some of the ones I saw at FabTech until I started looking at the pricing and realizing what I was going to be in for. I ended up settling on a used older machine, but it's a 2-axis up-acting press brake, 33-ton, 5 feet wide, plenty for what I need here. And it's hopefully going to be something that allows me to grow. And, you know, I was able to pay for it completely and not have to put it on a lease or any payments. So that's going to be big, and hopefully getting a good ROI on it. It's coming out of Illinois, so it's kind of been on a slow truck out here. Weather kind of played a role, and the holidays getting it out here, but should be arriving tomorrow, and one of the rare days we have in California with rain, so I'll be offloading my new-to-me press brake and a downpour, but I'll get it on the floor and get it running and get all the orders I have processed.
Awesome.
Could you sort of clarify with anybody that's unclear on what you mentioned? It was an up-acting press brake?
Yeah, so there's basically two styles of press brakes. There's the standard hydraulic or even mechanical down-acting, where the lower bed is fixed and you have a lower die, and then you have the upper punch that comes down to meet the material and then forms it. Then you have the Amada and Promacam, and my brake that I bought is a Guifil, which is a Portuguese machine. They're up-acting, so the top die is fixed and the bottom bed comes up. It's a little different, but they operate a little differently than a standard brake and typically don't have the crowning issues that you have with standard down-acting hydraulic brakes. So we'll see. I've never run one. I have been in shops that have run them, and the parts that come off of them are really nice. This was the right machine at the right price at the right time, so it hopefully should be what I needed to do.
Excellent. JD was looking at some smaller press brakes at Fab, and that's just one of the reasons why people go to FabTech. For all the listeners out there, you know, that have never been to a FabTech, you've heard us promote it and encourage people to go. If you've never been, if you can go, it's well worth the trip to go. Hopefully you can spend more than just one day there if you go, even, because it's just such a huge thing. You can't see everything in a day. But JD was looking at these hydraulic. I think it was also the same design where the bottom rose up to the blade.
Yeah.
It was I don't remember the name. For some reason the brand escapes me right now. I've got it some of it filmed. The whole design there was you could once you bought one machine, now you had the hydraulic pack, and then you could just add on other machines and not have to get a whole separate power supply, hydraulic power system for each another equipment that you got. So if you wanted to get an iron worker, you could, once you got one thing, you could get the other things and just use your hydraulic supply. I might even know the name of those things, or what they're called, the pump or the whatever. But I think
Edwards makes a package like that.
Who?
Edwards. I think it's a.
Sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
Like an iron worker with a hydraulic ports on it that you can. They have a tubing vendor package, the press brake package. Yeah, that's a great all-around fab tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be perfect,
and so,
JD.
Yeah, the reason that the whole thing with FabTech is he's able to go and see and get demonstrations and talk to the guy on the floor, see all the floor models, and then walk over another 100, 200 feet and see another brand name and maybe see some features that he wasn't even aware of. And so that's kind of what he almost committed to one brand, but then saw that, and then it's like, oh, whoa, I didn't know this was available, So he did buy a Burr King Pedestal belt sander.
Yeah, I saw that. That's a nice machine.
Yeah, that thing, he's loving that thing. I mean, he's tearing it up,
Yeah,
in a good sense of the word. He's using it a lot.
Yeah, my weekend shop has one of those Burr King sanders, pretty much like exactly the same one that he bought. My only beef with it is I wish they had two, so you don't have to keep changing the belts out from the Scotch-Brite to the sandpaper ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got a Model 760, which is the 2x72 grinder here from Burr King. I've had that for years, and I don't know how I do without it.
Yeah, he's thinking the same thing now. As he was just strictly hand tools. I don't think he even had a belt sander in the shop, and now he's, it's kind of like, before we have guests on here, I always go and kind of preview their Instagram pages and all that. So I spent the last 30 minutes or so looking at yours, Paul. make sure I didn't, come off like a total bonehead, But you made the comment like on a modular fixturing table. Once you get one, you don't, you're like, how did I do without this? And it's the same with a lot of things, belt sander and plasma cam, things like that. And, it opens up new possibilities, new opportunities. You get work that you didn't get previously. It's pretty cool when you can acquire new tools. And another YouTuber who's a machinist, an old school machinist, Keith Finner, he's Turn Right Machine Works on YouTube. He has this, he has a saying, when somebody says, how much did that set you back? And he's like, something like this doesn't set you back, it sets you forward. So I like that. I like that saying.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's hard for me to imagine what it was like without a CNC plasma table and press brake and fixture table and TIG welder, MIG welder. I just finished up a job today building some take-up arms for chain link weaving machines for the machine shop that's right next door to my shop here. He has welding capabilities and guys in there that can do them, but I'm able to do them so much faster because I have the fixturing table that he gives them to me, and I'm able to knock them out and get them back into where he needs them in service for their machines. And it's one of those things, like you said, once you have it, you kind of wonder, man, what was I doing before? And I remember welding tons of angle iron and channel and everything all over the top of my welding tables for years, building kind of dedicated tooling and fixturing. And once that job was done, you either trash all of it or you try to store it. Hopefully you get the job again, and it takes up valuable space. So fixture tables have definitely changed how I do things in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely will have one day.
Lots of options out there now. What model do you have, Paul?
I've got the Stronghand Build Pro, nitrided top, the older model with the space between the plates. I actually picked it up used a few years ago. Got a pretty good deal. It's got the full fabricator's tooling package and everything on it.
Nice.
And man, I'll tell you, like I said, I really don't know what I would do on the daily without it. I use it for R&D, for developing new product, for the quick welding jobs I do get in here. It's so handy that I don't ever want to be without one again.
Yeah, I saw a video a long time ago, Jesse James, and I think it was Blueco table with tooling package and everything. And he made the comment that it was just like it opened up your mind to possibilities, kind of like a big Lego set. It's sort of like it infused creativity into your brain. And I was listening to that, I was like, that sounds like such a big pile of crap, but I got one, and I'm like, yeah, I get it now, because it's kind of like you start playing with it. It's best to have a real application. You can't just make stuff up, you don't really exercise your brain that way. But when you go, well, how do I fixture this thing? And you start looking, and you start playing with the little stops and the cam locks and like, gee whiz. I mean, it's just like the possibilities are endless,
Yeah, I have my table in a 3D CAD model, so when I'm working inside of SolidWorks and developing a product, I can not only develop the product in CAD, but I can develop the tooling and the fixturing, go out to my shop, cut it, bend it, and set it up and know exactly what tools to put in what holes and not really even have to think about it too much. So It does definitely speed things up.
So you actually have all the tooling on top of the table in CAD?
Yeah,
you just position it together?
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they still have them, but I was able to download all the tooling and the table from Stronghand's website. They have full 3D CAD models of all their stuff, so I use that in SolidWorks extensively and can even use it to design around my fixture table. If I want to go to some nominal dimensions to make my tooling and fixturing easier, I can design around that because I have the table in the model. I don't have to worry about getting out there and having to put a 50,000 shim or something in there because I shorted the part.
That
definitely
cool.
helps speed things up.
I wonder if those models would work on Fusion 360.
They should. They're a standard file. They're not a SolidWorks native file. So you should be able to download them and use them and open them up in there.
I will definitely be looking into that.
A little known piece of trivia. One of the main dudes behind the Stronghand tooling package and tables and all that, his previous job was in tooling. I think it was McDonnell Douglas. So he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. It's a well thought out system.
Yeah, I always said whenever you look at those tables, it just seems like whoever designed those either really talked to people that worked on it and said, hey, what do you need? What would you like? What would make your life easier? And they listened. Or it was somebody that was like, man, I just need it to do this. And they're like, I'm just going to make it.
I'll tell you what, if it did nothing but hold the 90s true that I've been able to use it for on quick tack welding jobs or quick frame jobs, it would still be worth the money. because being able to drop a couple pins in there or a couple of hard stops, throw some pieces on there. If the miter was off a hair, it doesn't matter. Man, it's so much quicker than what I used to do.
Yeah, I bet.
You mentioned about the Jaws of Life jaws that you worked on, or maybe you still do. I remember seeing that a long time ago, and basically what I thought of when I saw that is your MIG-like TIG thread has overshadowed your TIG abilities. So I don't think people think of you as a TIG guy as much as they do a MIG-like TIG guy, but the TIG skills are definitely on point. You know, those, if anybody that's listening to this, if you go to Paul's Instagram account, just peruse through there till you find these jaws that are TIG welded S7 tool steel, like you said. Hey, those things are dimed in there, man. That is on point. But what I wanted to talk about there was a little bit about heat treat, because a job like that typically has definite, precise specifications for hardness and heat treat cycles and things like that. And there's a lot of people don't ever really have to get into that. You know, if you're normal, like if you're a fabricator, you don't necessarily get into heat treatment, but it is a very real thing in a job shop. You know, a part comes in and they specify, say, for instance, it's 4140, and it's specified that, you know, it's a certain hardness before fabrication, and then you have to send it out for heat treatment after weldings, and then it's got to be a certain hardness after heat treatment, and so maybe they harden it and then temper it or whatever. It's just a whole thing. But can you talk a little bit about that as far as jobs that you've done that had to go out for heat treatment?
Yeah, along with those S7 tool steel blades, I've done some parts for Southern California Edison for rigging up of power poles, and it's basically a choker assembly that helps them utilize one crane rather than two, and it's 17.4 stainless and has to be heat treated, so it's welded with 630 rod. It was kind of a gamble doing what we did. I helped develop the product with the rigging company that was under contract with SCE. And we did a bunch of prototypes in 1018 carbon, and they have destructive testing on site at the rigging company. So we just kept blowing these things apart until we were happy with the design. Then they wanted to find a way to keep them from rusting and having to be recoated because they're getting dropped from, 50 to 100 feet, depending on where they're being installed. So we opted for the 17.4 stainless, and luckily with the destructive testing, it was nice to just send out a couple parts and have them treated to different Rockwell scale numbers and brought back and blown apart again to see where they wanted, because when you're doing rigging, your typical safety factor is a 5-to-1. So if you're lifting something that's 1,000 pounds, you want to make sure your tooling's good to 5. I was able to get a lot of those contracts with the rigging company by doing the full product development with them. I don't have any formal training in engineering or really even welding, but I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of companies that do a lot of in-house testing, and it's gotten me a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge just with on-the-job training. Like those Jaws of Life rescue tools, same thing. They did a lot of their own destructive testing, so we were able to send out small batches of parts and get them tested and find out what was working, what wasn't. I think those S7 tool steel blades had like 18 processes in them by the time they were done, from laser cutting. They were getting them welded and then Blanchard ground, and I was able to figure out the weld sequencing on them because you have to preheat that S7 to 400 degrees. I was able to do a root pass, watch the inner pass temperature, and then do a weave pass over it, and then put them in an oven at 400 and then turn the oven off and let them cool down overnight. And they were able to put them through a time saver, which is basically a wide belt sander, to get them back true rather than have them fully Blanchard ground, which saved the company a lot of time and money. Then they'd go to full heat treat, black oxide treatment, everything else they had done. So there's a lot to know, and there's a lot to learn. There's definitely a lot that I don't know. But like I said, I've been fortunate to work with some companies that we've been able to do all of our own destructive testing on parts.
You can learn a lot if you're put in a situation where you do something, it goes to destructive testing or some other type of testing. You see the results, you correlate the results with something that's fresh in your mind, and you reiterate, you make adjustments, and then it goes through the loop again. And not everybody's fortunate enough to be in situations or scenarios like that, but man, you can learn a lot. It's like getting a PhD in that particular thing, and it's better than a PhD because it's hands-on, practical. You see oh, that busted wide open, that cracked wide open. We have to do this. We got to change this. Why did it do that? Well, we must have let it cool too quick. And then you change and you get better results, and there's no substitute for that.
No, yeah. I tell you what, I was wet behind the ears when they brought me that S7 tool steel. I think I was probably 24 years old, and they walked into my shop with that project, and I had never even heard of S7 tool steel. The first one I welded, man, I'll never forget the sound of S7 tool steel weld cracking after you weld it, and it's not heated properly, because that thing makes a ping that just resonates through the shop. And I destroyed a couple blades. I told them I was going to have to kind of feel out what it needed to do, and bought an oven for it specifically for that job, and even set up. I had an old Miller Synchrowave 300, one of the big dinosaurs, set up in the back of my shop on a separate welding table just for doing that job with the ovens around it and everything. Because once you kind of started a batch and you preheat everything, I'd have to do them in batches of 20. You kind of can't stop. You don't want to bring those parts up to temperature, get welding on them, and then let them cool down. Kind of have to, put your feet in the fire and just kind of go after it. But yeah, I was definitely fortunate to work with a lot of companies that gave me the experience and the opportunity to learn on the job.
That's kind of how I felt when I got lucky enough to go to work with airline maintenance. It takes every metal, known to mankind to make a jet engine or an airplane. When you combine all that stuff, you get experience with stuff you never would have a chance to even touch. And it's in an environment that it's not like mass production where you can't stop and do a little reading and research here and there if you need to. So it was really, really great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there, Jonathan?
Here.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's going on? Well, that's not how I plan my evening. I'm sorry.
Well,
about
now
that.
That's okay. Well, now you're on the hot seat. You got to tell us. You got to tell us a little bit about this hot job that you had to do. That was so much more important that you couldn't be on the podcast on time instead.
Oh, just a little 3/4 inch shaft buildup. Kind of like the video I did with you, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. They got a whole run of these things. I got 3 more to do tomorrow. This one has to be delivered in the AM. So it's like, oh, man. I was like, can I do it, in the mornings? No, I got to have it now. Bummer.
It's going to cost extra.
It's going to cost them extra. He's like, just charge me for it. You better believe it.
That's right.
It's my best customer, and probably make the most in perspective off of him, so you know how that is.
I do.
No.
Anyways, I apologize, guys. I did not mean to go that long.
Every one of us has been out in the shop under the helmet when there's pizzas being delivered to the house and everybody's eating pizza and laughing and cutting up inside on the other side of the wall, and you're hearing them, but you're out there turning and burning. We've all been there. No doubt.
Got to make hay while the sun's shining.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, now we're here. So, carry on.
Well,
I'll catch up.
We're on a roll here.
Okay, go.
I was going to say, you were talking about a bunch of the different type of work you've done. What would you say is the favorite type of work you like to do or you have done in the past?
I really like the product development side of things, taking a product from conception through to completion. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of the CAD design and everything, so I not only get to design and develop the product, but I get to go make it as well. So I'm not just handing somebody else a print. I can kind of see where my shortcomings are in the design by being on the shop floor and making it myself, and then coming back into the computer and changing it again. So that's something I really enjoy, is being able to see something I've designed from the get-go come into real life and end up on the welding table, finished at the end of a day, week, or month, however long it takes.
That's pretty cool. And kind of on the flip side of that, what's something you absolutely hate doing?
Running my business. Being stuck behind my desk doing paperwork. That's absolutely just is the pits. But it's got to be done, and that's one thing I've had to learn to become better at. Typically fabricators don't make the best business guys because we're better behind the hood. But over the last 15 years, I've had to learn to do that, and I'm still learning and trying to get better at doing that.
Yeah, it's totally necessary. We had John Saunders from NYCCNC on, and we talked about this. Some of the things about more businesses fail due to lack of business skill than lack of technical skill. You could be a great fabricator, a great plumber or whatever, but if you don't kind of at least get a little bit of a handle on the other things, keeping up with your bookkeeping and taxes and, making sure you got work flowing through the door when you're done with this job. You don't hit a dry season because you were so busy doing your work that you weren't able to be out there soliciting and making sure you had work coming in the pipeline. Small business guys like us, we wear a lot of hats, but at the end of the day, it's what it takes to be able to do what you want to do.
Absolutely. I think one of the best things I've done was hire a good accountant. Trying to worry about all the ins and outs and tax code and making sure I was doing things properly was too much for me, and I did that for quite a long time. So if you're getting started, or even if you're established in business and you don't have a good accountant yet, do yourself a favor. They're worth the money they charge every year. They will save you money, and they will save you time. And when you're in the industry we're in, manufacturing, fabrication, welding, your time is better spent on the shop floor making the money you know how to make. You're doing the tax stuff just doesn't make sense to me.
None of that stuff makes sense.
Yeah. In a perfect world, we do what we're good at and we get paid the most for and hire everything else out, but the lines aren't that cleanly drawn.
A little while ago, Jody had talked about your TIG welding, and I'm just looking here on Instagram, some trailing arm pivots, and it looks like you welded them on a positioner. And
got the aircrafter positioner.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got the one that I want, the MK T200. I know they just came out with a new one, but I'd be happy with the old one.
Yeah, I saw that digital one, man. That thing is nice.
Actually, I called them before they came out with the new one, and they're like, man, we get a lot of calls about that older machine. What's the big deal about that thing? I'm like, it's awesome. That's why. Yeah. Why did you stop making it?
Yeah, I snagged that thing off an eBay auction probably 10 years ago, and it's got the purge port on the back and everything, and came with a 3-jaw chuck, and I love that thing. That's when it comes to welding, if I could sit on a positioner all day, I don't think I'd mind it too much. I love that type of work.
Join the club.
Yeah, we all love it. That's just like getting a raise having one of those things, I mean, really, whenever you do get those short run jobs or long run, whatever you want to, like 100 parts or so, 100 parts is something like, 2 or 3 inches in diameter. The difference in the money you make not having a positioner versus having one, your hourly rate just about doubles,
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is fun too. It's just, you're less tired at the end of the run and you're more proud of your work. It's nice.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, go ahead, Roy.
No, I was just say if Jonathan has anything that we may not have already covered.
Did you guys talk about the carts yet?
Oh, yeah.
His products?
Probably too much.
Of course. That's all right. We'll let that one go. Did you talk about MIG like TIG?
Yep.
We did. I was going to save it, and I just couldn't do it. I just had to.
Yeah, and that MIG like TIG definitely is either a love or hate deal. There's almost no gray area. You're either a fan of it or you're not, and I definitely have heard enough from the non-fans.
Yeah, I get it. Here's the thing. It's just kind of like, it's almost like push versus pull, Yeah. You're gonna draw haters out of the woodwork there too. Part of it is just because MIG is not just MIG. You got short circuit MIG, you got spray transfer MIG, the different variations, pulse spray. And so when you're push versus pull, you need to know some more details before you say even have the conversation. But people are just assume that everybody's short circuit MIGging or spray, or because they're assuming everybody does what they do, and they might work in a manufacturer of railroad trailers where they're doing spray all day, really hauling butt, and they're telling somebody that's fabricating little carts out of 1.5 eighth wall square tubing how to do stuff, and it's not the same thing. So it's just, everybody just needs to chill. That's all I'm saying.
So, Paul, what is the best advice that you have been given, and what's the best advice that you could give to others?
Best advice I've been given was hard work beats talent. I've always tried to go into every project and every job gaining as much knowledge as I can. While I think that's a good thing and something to still do, and I still strive to do every day, sometimes just rolling up your sleeves and getting stuff done is the better way to go at some jobs. Planning to plan sometimes doesn't really foot the bill and put the money in the business where it needs to go. So you got to take every job as its own. You have to look at what it takes to get that job done versus getting every job done a certain way.
talking about today. Somebody else, it's been coined several times by different people. I think the thing that I read said something like, hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, something like that. Well, you've obviously got both. You've got some talent, and you're willing to work hard, and that's the best of both worlds. But if you're strictly relying on talent, that's, you know, like I said, some guy who's willing to get up earlier than you, drink a cup of coffee, and bust his butt he's gonna pass you in that race every time.
Yeah, no, I try not to overthink too many things anymore. I've done plenty of that in my life, and it just brings everything to a halt. So putting the helmet down and burning wire sometimes just makes sense. Advice that I could give someone, especially in business, would be communication. That's the absolute key. I think being married for 12 years has kind of taught me that, along with being in business for, 15. Whether it's a coworker, your boss, a customer, a vendor, anybody, communication's key. You got to have those open lines of communication and keep them open. 90% of the problems in anything will get worked out just by talking it out, a reasonable amount. I think there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on or lack of communication, and assumptions get made, and that's when things kind of fall apart.
Absolutely.
I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again because it applies 100% what you're talking about right here. My machinist friend, really good communicator. He'll pick up the phone and call a customer in a minute, and he's always had good relationships with his customers. But, they give a drawing that was, holding tolerances of maybe a thousandths where a quarter inch would have been fine. Mm-hmm. And just picking up the phone and say, hey, is this, what are the meaningful tolerances on this part, and what are the ones I can fudge on, because I can meet all the tolerances, but it's going to take a lot longer, and the next batch is going to cost more too. And are these really all important, or will you buy it off if it's 10 thousandths out or whatever? Oh gosh, that overall length is not here's the main thing from this axle to this motor mount because of the gear lash. That's the main tolerance. Everything else can be off 10 times. And just knowing that and getting the verbal buy-off from the guy, that makes, all of a sudden, okay, all right, that's where we're going to focus our efforts, and now we're going to be able to get these parts out like a week ahead of time. But if without the communication, you think that 1,000ths tolerance is goal, that's the rule. And, it is the rule if you don't communicate and know otherwise.
Yeah, I learned that lesson again today. I had a customer contact me for some CNC plasma cutting, and verbally they told me 3/16 material, but the drawing called for quarter inch. Instead of doing what I knew better to do, which was call them back and verify that they wanted 3/16, I cut 3/16, and guess who's staying late tonight to cut quarter inch material?
That's
sweet.
Yep.
Guess who's wishing they weren't on a podcast right now so they could get back to work?
No, I'm really honored to be here. I'm in good company, and you guys have had some great guests on here, and I'm really honored to be part of it.
Well, thanks. We're honored to have you, that's for sure. What are future plans for ZTFab, personally as well as your business?
Business-wise, I'd really like to grow the manufacturing side. Buying the CNC press brake and trying to keep as much of it in-house as I can. I'm going to be hiring some more people, trying to decrease the lead time on my parts and grow the business side of that to fill the need and the want for the products I'm making. Personally, it's going to have to be letting go of my business a little bit. This is something I've built from scratch, starting 15 years ago, and learning to let my hands off of it a little bit so it can grow and kind of become its own thing is probably going to be the hardest thing I'll deal with in the coming year or two. I tend to be a little bit controlling, hence the name Zero Tolerance. I was given that name by my uncle and kind of stuck, and that's how the shop got named. So it's a hard thing to do. You kind of raise it almost like a child and want to see it do well, but you got to know you got to let it go and kind of start doing its own thing for it to really prosper.
Yeah. You really need to get some T-shirts made that have the ZTFab, and then under it says, "No tolerance will be tolerated."
There's your new slogan.
That's a good one.
You'll do it though. You'll do it though, Paul, because you're a process and systems guy. I can see that, and that's what it takes to relinquish your hands. If you have processes and systems in place, you can then much more easily let somebody else do the stuff, where you don't have to do every little thing without processes and systems. It's kind of tough.
Exactly. And I want to make sure that the product that my customers get is still to the standards that I want it to be. I see so many shops hire a bunch of people to get the product out, but the quality suffers, and I'm really trying to not let that happen, which is a hard thing. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have mistakes, which are fine as long as you learn from them and move on. But I really want to make sure that every customer that gets a product is completely satisfied and getting the best product that we can make every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, what do you like to do outside of work and welding personally?
Used to race a lot of off-road. I haven't in the past couple years, but I've been trying to build the business again. Looking to try to get back into that as I can hopefully get some help in here and get some of the load off my shoulders. Used to race the Baja 1000, rode in a couple trucks, and used to be the riding mechanic for them. Chased for a couple teams on trophy truck and had a good time doing that. I enjoy camping, going out and going to the desert with my friends and sitting around a good campfire and doing that. So hopefully I can get some of that in this next year. I haven't done that in probably the last 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's always fun to get away and decompress a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to do that too. I'm learning that I've had my nose to the grindstone for so long now, how important that is to kind of break away and get a reasonable break so you kind of get your head back on straight and come back into the shop headstrong and ready to work again. You kind of get into a groove, which, you're not being unproductive, but you're probably not working at 100% because you've been doing it for so long. So it'd be nice to get away for a little bit.
Yeah, really. I know I would love to. I just can't.
I know the feeling.
The trophy truck stuff, that's what I'd like to do with my GMC Sierra. Once it gets downgraded from daily use, I'd like to make it a pre-runner. So I follow along a lot of the pre-run stuff, Baja stuff and all that. I think it's just sweet. Probably never run it or race it, but I like that look and everything.
Yeah. Being out here on the West Coast, I'm a little spoiled. You can pretty much drive an hour and a half and be in a desert and go race. A couple hours from Mexico where I live. I've been all up and down the Baja Peninsula racing, so it's definitely fun and definitely something to get into.
Yeah, one of my dreams, I've always wanted to go to the desert and take my truck or four-wheeler or whatever, my truck, since I have it, but never have. One day I will.
I don't doubt it.
You guys have anything else for Paul? I
got one more thing.
Awesome.
I have seen a little bit of dual shield flux core on your Instagram page, so I know you can do it. What kind of jobs do you do that with?
Those were some more destructive test fixtures for that rigging company.
Okay.
All 5/8 plate, basically nothing but pull fixtures for testing some of their nylon slings that they were sending out to SCE, which is Southern California Edison, our local power company. And I did those on my Power MiG 200 with 035, the same thing JD runs a lot of on that Power MiG 210. Mm-hmm. Just push that thing to the limit. If it could go to 11, I would have put it to 11. But man, I've got that thing tapped out. But it runs it and it wets in nice. And I'll tell you what, I know why JD loves that stuff, because I'd have no other way. I don't stick weld. I honestly never have in my life. TIG and MIG have pretty much been the only processes I've ever done. And having that dual shield capability, running the same C25 gas that I run on my short circuit MIG, I pull my spool of 030 out of there, I throw that 035 dual shield in, just crank every knob to the right, and let it eat. And it burns in there, and those fixtures have held now for a year and a half, 2 years, however long ago I built them, and never been back for rework, never been back for anything, and they're put on a 100,000-pound tensile strength tester a couple times a year.
I'm a believer now. I didn't really ever have an opportunity to do it. Didn't want to, didn't need to. I have people ask about it from time to time, but then when I met JD and started talking to him, that he kind of like pulled my interest in that direction, and then seeing what he did with it, I really need to get into this, and so it's been fun. It's been a fun year. 2016 was a fun year. That's when I kind of got into dual shield flux core. I don't really have a need to, like keep it on a machine or anything like that. But I'm glad that I dabbled and learned how to run it a little bit and learned what JD uses it for, and film some of his stuff. And it's been an eye opener for me, big time eye opener.
I've only probably run half of that 30-pound spool I bought. I'd run it more if I had the opportunity. I don't really get work like that very often. But when I get the chance, man, I love that stuff. I did learn a hard lesson. That stuff burns hot. And the 2 welding gloves I had on my left hand weren't enough, and I still got a big blister on the back of my hand from that stuff. So it's no joke. And so, I was surprised my little 200 did it, but just tops out it enough to get it done.
I'm surprised the little 210 does what it does with it, because I didn't think it would originally. But, of course, you can burn one up eventually if you just keep pushing it to the max like that. Anyway, enough of dual shield. I just, it was on my head.
Paul, have you talked about, I know Jody asked you about the future of ZTFab in general, but have you talked about any products that you'd like to bring to the market besides the ones you have now? I
have a growing list that I'd like to develop. The kind of growing the business and getting more help in here would allow me to do more of the product development. I don't want to spill the beans on too much of it yet. There's nothing that's going to be game changing or anything like that. A lot of it falls in line with what I'm already making. I want to do dedicated plasma carts, and I'm also open to anybody who has ideas and sees a need for things that they'd want to see in a shop. If you have a good idea and want to see it get made, and it makes sense, then I'd love to hear it.
I have one for you. We'll have to discuss that later on.
That sounds good.
That's a pretty cool thing about Instagram, isn't it? That it's kind of like market test bed there for you. You not even on ideas that you throw out. You can see somebody else throw an idea out, and you can see the response to it, and you kind of like you got a little bit of an idea on whether or not it has a chance just from that, and then maybe you tweak it a little bit, put out your version, and then check the response to it, and you're not just playing blind archery. You've actually got some real feedback. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening on Instagram. There's a ton of great welders and machinists and fabricators. The community out there is great. I wish I had more time at FabTech to meet up with a lot of them. I met up with a few of you. Was glad to do that. I'm going to try to make it out to Chicago next year and see how many I can meet up with out there.
You got to. We're planning on making it out there, so you got to.
Gonna try. Just looking around my shop, one thing I would really like to see, probably wouldn't, I don't know how many people would buy them, but a really cool oxy-fuel cutting cart would be nice, because they always have just those cheap, chintzy, dumb-looking ones that are all flimsy and everything. It's like something sturdy and nice would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some clips of a previous FabTech of some that were awesome. It had a whole lockbox with expanded metals so that everything can breathe and you don't create a bomb, with mixed gases. But then you open it up and everything has a place, little snap-in places for your rosebud tip, your cutting head. A lot of thought put into it, much like Paul's welding carts, where, you're thinking about where to put stuff and get stuff out of the way. So there's definitely a market for that. You probably could do a better job than they do. So there's an idea for you.
Yeah, I'll have to talk a little more with you, Roy, and see what you like on that thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't use mine very often, but it's over in the corner.
It's there when you need it.
Well, I think I had a little list here, not a very organized list, but I tapped on all the bullet points that I had, so I got nothing.
Mine are done.
I think we're wrapped it up here. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Paul. My wife and I was talking about your carts tonight, so we're definitely gonna have to make that a priority here soon. I got it all designed in my head, and I just got to get it translated into you.
Let me know what you're at.
We will do that. Can't wait to have one of those in my shop.
I look forward to it.
Just one more thing to ask. Is there anything that you would like to add, Paul, that we may not have talked about or that you would just like to say?
You guys are doing great. Love that you guys have, brought this podcast around. I think this is an industry that's very underserved with younger people coming from an employer and somebody who's trying to hire. Having as much knowledge out there for people entering, having as much knowledge out there for people who have been in this industry for a long time definitely helps. So just keep up the good work. You guys are doing great stuff.
Appreciate
Well,
that.
if somebody's interested in a cart or wants to get in touch with you about a job shop type job, what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, ZTFab.com or alacart.com. They'll both take you to the same place. I'm also on Instagram at ZTFab. Either one of those is a good way to get a hold of me.
All right.
Perfect.
You heard it.
Yep. Mention that you heard it here, and maybe he'll give you a sticker or something.
I try to give stickers in every order when I have them in stock, but my sticker guy lags a little bit. So,
Well, I guess that's a pretty good place to wrap this up. And want to thank Paul again for being on. We had a really great time talking with you.
yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Definitely want to thank our sponsor again, CK Worldwide. 2017 is their 50th anniversary. Congratulations, guys. And we look forward to seeing what's new coming out.
A few quick words about CK Worldwide. You know, they offer the FlexLock 360 torch, the Super Flex cables, all kinds of different accessories for TIG welding, as well as the stubby gas lens kits, which basically can turn your 17 or 26 air-cooled torch into something a whole lot smaller and more maneuverable and able to use gas lenses with it. We all use CK stuff, and it's good stuff.
Absolutely. I want to also say a special thanks to our patrons over on patreon.com. This month, our top supporters are Dave Horvath, Scott Silva, and Philip Kaminsky. If you would like to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Welding Tips and Tricks podcast. And we definitely want to thank everyone that supports us there.
And if you'd like to reach us here at the podcast, our email address is weldingtipsandtrickspodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you'd like to call in and leave us a voicemail, our phone number is 915-308-7024. And I'm Roy Crumrine.
I'm Jody Collier.
And I'm Jonathan Lewis.
This is ZTFab, and that's a wrap.
Proof
Well, if you
positive that you've
do I
listened to at least one other episode.
Do I have to sing something about a rocking chair, though?
Go ahead,
Oh,
go ahead and sing us a couple
about
bars.
I forgot about that one. Oh, wow. I didn't remember that one got put in there, but dang it.